What is History? By E.H. Carr. The role of society in shaping individuals. Society or the individual, a question with no clear answer. But, it's important to understand their complementary relationship. From birth, we are molded by society. Our language and environment shape our thoughts and ideas. The Robinson Crusoe myth highlights the impossibility of complete independence. Even Robinson carried his cultural and religious beliefs with him. Individualization is a product of advanced society. But, it doesn't mean society and the individual are at odds. National character is shaped by society and education. Human nature is a historical phenomenon, not a biological one. Different attitudes to social relations are shaped by society. The historical context. The cult of individualism is a pervasive myth in modern history. It's said to have started with the Renaissance, but it's a normal process of advancing civilization. Individualism was the basis of the great 19th century philosophy of utilitarianism. But it was a social process representing a specific stage in historical development. The increased individualization which accompanied the rise of the modern world was a normal process of advancing civilization. The whole process was a social process representing a specific stage in historical development. Many signs suggest that this period of history has reached its end. The ideology generated by this long and fruitful period is still a dominant force in Western Europe and throughout the English-speaking countries. Individualism has become today the slogan of an interested group and a barrier to our understanding of what goes on in the world. We shall arrive at no real understanding either of the past or of the present if we attempt to operate with the concept of an abstract individual standing outside society. The role of the historian. The knowledge of the historian is not his exclusive individual possession. The facts of history are a product of many generations and different countries. The historian is a social phenomenon, a conscious or unconscious spokesman of his society. He approaches the facts of the historical past in this capacity. The historian is just another dim figure trudging along in another part of the procession. New angles of vision constantly appear as the procession moves along. The historian is part of history. The point in the procession at which he finds himself determines his angle of vision over the past. The relevance of historical works. Classics like Grote's History of Greece and Mommsen's History of Rome are still relevant today. Grote's idealized picture of Athenian democracy reflects the aspirations of the rising British middle class. Similarly, Mommsen's History of Rome was influenced by the political climate of his time. His idealization of Caesar reflected the need for a strong leader to save Germany from ruin. Great history is written when the historian's vision of the past is illuminated by insights into the problems of the present. Studying history helps us understand the present by providing context and insights. The legacy of Sir Louis Namier. Namier was a true conservative, unlike most British historians of his time. He believed that change was associated with fear for the future and could be for the worse. Namier's work focused on two significant periods in history. In English history, he explored the period before the French Revolution, where politics was still immune from the fanaticism of ideas. He also studied the European Revolution of 1848, a failed revolution that demonstrated the hollowness of ideas in the face of armed force. Namier's work shows that the intrusion of ideas into politics is futile and dangerous. He believed in the importance of avoiding political doctrine and dogma in thinking. Namier's work is a reminder that practical solutions to concrete problems are more important than political philosophy. Meinecke's reflective work. Take the example of Meinecke, a German historian who lived through a series of revolutionary changes. His work reflects the social and political context of his time. Through his works, we see three different Meineckes, each reflecting a different historical epoch. His development as an individual is interesting, but what matters to the historian is how he reflects his time into the historical past. The work of historians like Meinecke reminds us that history is not just a collection of facts, but a product of the society and historical background of the historian. Historians' work and society. Historians are not immune to the changes in society. As society changes, so does the work of the historian. Take the example of Professor Butterfield. During the war, he spoke of the marriage between present and past, a reversal of his earlier views. Similarly, Gale's work on Napoleon showed how French political life influenced the judgments of French historians. Historical trends and interpretations are a reflection of society. The thought of historians is molded by society. The role of the historian and social context. Some historians believe that individuals are the decisive factor in history. However, renowned historians like Sir Isaiah Berlin argue that social forces also play a critical role. The bad King John theory, which emphasizes the importance of individual behavior, has a long history. However, this theory is problematic as it oversimplifies complex social structures. To truly understand history, we must also study the social context in which it occurred. For instance, understanding the social and economic conditions of the time can provide insight into why certain events occurred. History and social sciences. Early biologists classified species in cages and aquariums, ignoring the living creature's environment. Perhaps the social sciences today have not yet fully emerged from that primitive stage. Some people distinguish between psychology as the science of the individual and sociology as the science of society. But the psychologist who fails to study the social environment of the individual would not get very far. History is not just about recounting events, but understanding why individuals acted as they did. It's not just about individual qualities, but also the environment and context in which they acted. For instance, King John's badness was not just about his greed or stupidity. He was also the unconscious tool of vested interests opposed to the rise to power of the feudal barons. The importance of numbers in history. History is often thought of as the biography of great men. But numbers are equally important in shaping historical events. Carlyle and Lenin recognized the power of millions of individuals. These nameless millions acted together and were a social force. Movements may be started by minorities, but they need the support of the multitude. Numbers count in history. The historian doesn't need to take cognizance of a single discontented peasant, but millions of them are a factor that cannot be ignored. The unintended consequences of human action. Adam Smith's hidden hand and Hegel's cunning of reason are examples of how individuals can serve a purpose they are unaware of. Marx also noted how individuals enter into necessary relations independent of their will. Even Tolstoy recognized that individuals can be unconscious instruments in the attainment of historic aims. And Professor Butterfield noted that historical events can twist in a direction no one intended. The Great Economic Depression of the 1930s was brought about by the actions of individuals pursuing different aims. It's difficult to believe that any individual willed or desired it. It's a serious error to assume that the thought behind the act is the thought of the individual actor. The historian must investigate what lies behind the act and the social forces that produce unintended consequences. The role of the rebel in history. What Tyler and Pugachev were not just individuals in revolt against society. Their role in history was owed to the mass of their followers and the specific conditions of their age and country. Even an individualist like Nietzsche was a direct product of European society. He was a phenomenon that could not have occurred in China or Peru. The role of the rebel in history has some analogies with that of the great man. Great men are not outside history but are individuals and social phenomena of outstanding importance.